this weekend. It was the birthday parade, and I am unbelievably curious to find out what you thought of it, and then, as importantly, what the man whose birthday parade it was thought of it too, none other than our own president, Donald Trump. What are you hearing? What are people saying?
You know, it's really important to understand when we think about Donald Trump, how much time he spends complaining. I mean, nothing makes the man happy. And spending $45 million on a birthday celebration appears not to have made him happy either. He's kind of pissed off. I mean, he's pissed off at the soldiers. I mean, he's accusing them of hamming it up. And by that he seems to mean that they were having a good time, that they were waving, that they were enjoying themselves and showing a convivial face rather than a military face.
Interesting.
And he kind of reamed out Hegseth for this. Apparently there was a phone call and he said to Hegseth, you know, the tone was all wrong. Why was the tone wrong? Who staged this? There was the tone problem. You know, Trump, he keeps repeating himself. So that was the word on that phone call was tone. I would interpret that he wanted something menacing, I suppose, you know, something military, like something like, this is the most staggering force in the world and maybe it will come for you. Instead of, I think it appeared to a lot of people that there was a kind of festive air. Everybody was actually celebrating something. You know, the 250 years of the U.S. military, probably celebrating that more than Donald Trump's birthday. But it didn't send the message that he apparently wanted, which is that he was the commander-in-chief of this menacing enterprise.
Well, certainly having soldiers dressed up in costumes from 200 years ago would not send a menacing vibe to an enemy if they were looking at this. I thought it had the vibes of a sort of trade show for the army, that the plinth that they were sitting on, the sort of theatre that the VIPs were sitting on, that Donald Trump was sitting on with next to Hegseth and Melania, it looked like it had been put up overnight, and it literally looked like something from a trade show.
Yeah, no. I mean, it was not. None of this was sending the message that he seems to have wanted to send, which is that which was a threat. I think that's what he wanted. And he got the opposite of that. He got a kind of a Hamish gathering.
Right.
Which, by the way, no one went to. The other thing. So
right.
So he's insisted, put it out. He said 250,000 people.
Yeah, Stephen Chang put that out.
Yeah, but that was from Trump. Put it out, 250,000. That is it, 250,000. He kept saying this, to everybody else, saying but 250,000. When in fact it was. I mean, the people I know there who were there said tops maybe 40,000, and probably more like 20,000.
You could see the empty bleachers. You could see as the drones pulled back, lots of empty lawn.
No. I mean, nobody was. I mean, who would go? It's hard to get anybody a draw to any parade. It's a parade.
Well, I can imagine. I mean, as a parent of two boys, when they were little, I could imagine having taken them to that because they would be intrigued by watching the men march by. I mean, the thing I found most striking, and I admit I come from a land where I'm not sure Britain could do very much militarily now, but we sure can put on a good parade. And so the one thing that you can see is all the soldiers marching in time. And the thing I found really striking was that lots of them, of the brigades in camo, literally weren't in step with each other.
I think we're very bad at parades. I think parades are like one of those old-fashioned entertainment things like circuses. I mean, the television has basically put those things out of business a long time ago.
But this was a producer, my understanding is that Pete Hegseth knew, who put the thing together. I mean, I don't know why Mark Burnett wasn't involved in putting something together that felt more professional.
Yeah, well, it's not even the professional thing that I think is most interesting, that somehow they didn't get the memo from Trump that he wanted threat and menace. And they got the opposite of that. Nice. They got nice. The military is a nice military, friendly.
We're going to throw sweets into the crowd, which is, of course, what they do. And do you think that was a deliberate misinterpretation of his message? Was this actually quite a smart, subversive take on his message? Or do you think it was just accidental, but they really didn't understand?
No, I think it probably was subversive, or better heads prevailed on this as a branding exercise. I mean, Trump's thing, I think, is to think of the military like we thought of it in the 1950s and 60s, when Russia was the enemy and it was a Cold War enterprise, and it was sort of Dr. Strange-Lovian, and and we were always, the guys in the military were always ready to bomb someone back into the Stone Age. And it was a threatening force then, which I think was very difficult, and many politicians found it very difficult to contain. But the military has changed radically since then. I mean, it's now a sort of, very PR aware, HR aware kind of, they bring in McKinsey consultants all the time. I mean, it's a much more corporate, I mean, for better or worse, corporate, image conscious, and DEI, basically complex organization. And I think that's what we saw out there yesterday, and that's not what Trump wanted to see. I don't think he understands that's what the military has become. Although, in every situation in which he's faced with the military, the top brass, he's always complaining about it. They're always pulling out PowerPoints to show him, and he's always leaving the room because he can't watch a PowerPoint.
Right. Well, and you think, obviously, the future of military is much more technical. It's much more cyber. It's relying on drones. I mean, it was hard not to listen to that tank creaking in the silence down the street because nobody was cheering, that it was like watching fax machines roll by in the age of the iPhone. Yeah, no,
I mean, I think that it is. I mean, he is, again, Trump is located somewhere in the past. I've often put it as 1965. All of his references. And I think this, again, he expected to see that kind of military. Instead, he got the modern military, a complex organization with all kinds of constituencies, very aware of how it is perceived, of how it wants to be perceived.
Yeah, well, I loved the robot dog, but what I was struck by was watching the parade, and he looked bored. I mean, this is a long time for Donald Trump to sit still, other than when he was jumping up and saluting. Melania looked bored. Marco Rubio was yawning, and Pete Hegseth just looked extremely anxious to be sitting there next to the president in charge of this parade.
Well, again, it's parades. Americans don't watch parades. Parades are actually boring. They're repetitive. They go on forever and ever. There really is no narrative. It's all old fashioned.
There's no narrative. It reminds me actually of, I think, the second time Obama's second inauguration, he had to sit there watching all these little bands from small town America, and he was wildly chewing gum to keep himself, I think, sort of focused.